Hello everybody, in Module 5, I discuss real effects of accounting disclosures. Module 5 has 6 lessons. Today, I'm focusing on Lesson 1. I'm going to provide introduction to the real effects literature. What are real effects models? Real effects models, as the name implies, they incorporate managers' real decisions into disclosure models. Because there are also disclosure models, like the disclosure models we see on the previous module. There will be an informed party, usually the firm or the manager, chooses how much to disclose to uninformed party, investors. Both the manager's real decisions and disclosure would affect market perception and therefore short-term prices. And most papers in those literature are about ex-ante disclosure models with a focus on ex-ante disclosure precision. If the real effects literature does not generate investment distortions, then the results will not be very interesting. To generate investment distortions, we need two necessary conditions. First, the manager and the market have different objective functions. The second, there is information asymmetry between the manager and the market. The manager knows something that the market does not know, and there is no credible way to perfectly communicate such information. For example, disclosure cannot be verifiable, otherwise the Grossman unraveling result may come back. Those two conditions result in law of iterated expectations not applying, as we're going to see later in this lesson, which is going to generate investment distortions. How to introduce different objectives between the manager and the investors? Similar to many papers we have seen before, in particular in the disclosure module. They assume that the manager has to sell the firm, or at least a part of the firm, after disclosure, but before all the uncertainties are realized. In this sense, managers would put some weight about short-term stock price, and this is also referred to as managerial myopia. Of course, managerial myopia or managers' preference about short-term stock price can also come from some investors being short-term, and they only care about short-term prices. You can check Knode and Sapra 2016 JAR review for excellent discussion of this issue. So what is managerial myopia? Managerial myopia applied to the real effects literature means managers take myopic actions to maximize their payoffs at the expense of firm value. For example, earnings manipulation, cut R&D expenses, choose risky projects that have lower NPV. Implicitly, this implies there is efficient benchmark such that the actions when managers only care about short-term stock prices are going to be different from this efficient benchmark. So a necessary but not sufficient condition for managerial myopia to make a difference in the real effects literature is the existence of frictions in the economy. Because if there is no friction in the economy, then the managers are not going to make decisions that are different from the efficient benchmark. In general, two conditions for managerial myopia to make a difference. The first is information asymmetry. The second is managerial focus on short-term stock price. Absence of either condition will make managerial myopia not an issue. And let's illustrate that using a simple model, which is also a basic setup of pretty much all the real effects models. There are 3 dates. The manager has some private information, theta, and the manager is going to choose some action A based on theta. The private signal theta, as well as the manager's action, is going to affect the firm's terminal value, V. And V is also affected by some random shock epsilon, not known to anybody in advance. At date 2, all the uncertainties are going to be resolved. So P2 would be exactly equal to the terminal firm value. At date 1, the market sets the price. The price would be expectation of the firm's terminal value at 2 based on information that the market has at date 1. And the information that the market has at date 1 is usually a subset of theta, because the manager knows theta, but the market does not know. So knowing I1, the information set of the market at date 1 is usually insufficient to back out theta. The manager at day 0 is going to choose the action A, the real decisions, to maximize a weighted average of prices. The manager puts some weight on the date 1 price and puts some weight on date 2 price. Note here, the expectation is taken with respect to I0. I0 is the manager's information at day 0. And I0 consists of theta, because the manager knows about theta, and consists of A theta, because the manager knows what action the manager chooses. And in the first best case, that means the markets can observe everything, theta and the manager's action. And in that case, the action will be chosen to maximize the terminal firm value. And the first order condition with respect to A is going to determine the first best action level. When is first best going to be retained? First best is going to be retained if there is no information asymmetry or the manager does not care about short-term price. Let's first look at the no information asymmetry case. When theta is known by the markets, then the market can step into the manager's shoes and know about A theta, which means that the information set at date 1 would be theta A theta, will be the same as the manager's information set, I0. And then the law of iterated expectation means that the expectation of P1 conditional I0 will be the same as the expectation of the terminal value of the firm conditional A theta. And the same applies for expectation of P2 conditional I0. So the optimum A is again going to maximize the expected terminal firm value conditional A and theta. The optimal choice of A is equal to the first best. And intuition is, as we just went through, when there is no informational friction, there is no information asymmetry. Expectation of the markets is the same as the expectation of the manager, because you have the same information set. The law of iterated expectations is going to apply. And so expectation P1 conditional I0 is the same as expectation P2 conditional I0. It's the same as the expectation of the terminal value of V conditional I0. Now let's look at what if the manager does not care about short-term price. If the manager does not care about short-term price, that means alpha equals 0. And in that case, the manager is going to choose action to maximize expectation P2 conditional I0. But P2 is just the terminal value. And so it will be the same as the expectation of the terminal value conditional A theta. And again, the manager chooses the optimal action, the same as the first best. And intuition is when the markets and the manager, they only care about terminal payoffs. They don't care about the intermediate price. P1 does not matter. The manager and the market only cares about long term. There is no incentive of conflict. Managers is going to choose the action that maximizes firm value. When real effect is going to be non-trivial. When alpha is bigger than 0, which means the manager puts some weight on the short-term price, and only the manager knows about theta, then the expectation of P1 conditional I0 would be expectation of V conditional I1, and then conditional I0. This, in general, is not the same as expectation of V conditional I0, because the law of iterated expectations would not apply when I1 is a subset of I0, which means the manager knows more than the market. The law of iterated expectations that you usually know, it would apply if I1 contains I0, means that the market knows at least as much as the manager. If you think about when the law of iterated expectations apply, for example, you think about I1 as tomorrow's weather and I0 as today's weather, then tomorrow's weather clearly contains more information than today's weather, because tomorrow's weather includes today's weather information as well as some information related to tomorrow. So the optimal A to maximize the weighted average of the expected price would in general result in a solution that is not the first best. Now the question is, because the law of iterated expectations does not apply due to I1 being a subset of I0, will making I1 more informative help? In other words, with more transparency help? The answer is, in general, not necessarily, unless you improve I1 such that I1 directly reviews theta. Intuition comes from a general insight in welfare economics. In an economy with multiple frictions, if you just remove one friction, you make I1 more informative, does not necessarily make things better off. because you may exacerbate other frictions. Now let's use an illustrative example based on the Stein 1989 QJE paper that we already discussed in previous modules. They know theta as current true earnings that is unobservable to the market, and A theta as the amount of earnings management to increase current earnings, but is going to reduce long-term firm value, and is thus inefficient. You can think about A theta as, for example, cutting R&D. And in this case, the terminal value of V is theta plus beta theta minus some cost as a function of A theta plus epsilon. Theta is current true earnings, beta theta is long-term firm value as a function of current true earnings. You can see here, any earnings management is going to reduce long-term firm value. It's not going to increase the long-term firm value. So under first best, you should choose zero earnings management. Now, let's look at the general case. When theta is not observed to the market only observes a report R, which is theta plus A theta. So the manager is going to choose the earnings management strategy to maximize a weighted average of P1 and P2. Because A is endogenous choice by the manager, we learned from the previous module that the market is going to conjecture that the manager is going to choose some A hat. And so the market is going to subtract A hat from R in pricing the firm. And the manager has to take A hat as given in choosing their A theta. So when we do this, the first order condition results in the following equation. We can see here, earnings management is not going to be zero. So it's going to be different from the first best. And we can also see the higher alpha is, which means the more myopic the manager is, the higher the amount of earnings management. When alpha equals zero, when the manager is not myopic at all, then we again go to the first best, and there is no earnings management. To conclude, managerial disclosure can affect the manager's real decisions through capital market pricing. And this is the core insights of the real effects literature. And you need two assumptions to generate non-trivial insights from the real effects literature to generate distortions of real decisions. Managers know more about the market, and managers care about short-term stock prices. If you're interested to test your understanding of this lesson, a review quiz of this lesson can be found at the link in the slides. Thank you very much.